Hey, my name is TJ. I'm a person in long-term recovery. For me, that means I haven't had a drink or a drug since August 9th, 2016. I'm here hosting the Recovery Matters podcast with
Liz Thielen.
Hey, thank you so much for coming on. Do you identify as a person in recovery?
I do. I identify as a person in long-term recovery from compulsive gambling.
Okay, what's that like?
So I was a card player. I was a casino gambler. And
Yep.
so that means no casino gambling for about 13 years now.
What was life like for you growing up?
I came from a family of divorce and addiction, and my mom remarried into a wonderful, loving family that also really loved gambling. And they were highly invested in gambling. Like all family gatherings, we're playing cards and dice for money. I used to go to the track with my parents and help them pick the horses. And when I was of age, we were going to the casino together. And while they very much enjoyed and still do enjoy gambling, they were able to do it in a controlled way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I look back and recognize that I had some vulnerabilities and risk factors that they didn't have that made me in that same circumstance interact with gambling in a different way than they do.
When you were younger, did you kind of like look up to the lifestyle of gambling?
Yeah, definitely. So, coming into this family, it was all about love and excitement and acceptance. And my stepdad got me very interested in sports, football and boxing, and that actually ended up becoming part of my life. But what's the boxing capital of the world, Las Vegas. And so it was kind of that, it was all tied in together: energy, excitement, action, boxing, family. It was just all wrapped up into one really kind of exciting package that kind of took a not healthy direction for me.
Do you think like that drive that you used as an athlete kind of fueled some of that, the gambling, like the need to win or the want to win kind of thing?
Absolutely, 100%. And, in some of the work that I do with athletes, talking about our unique risk for gambling in an unhealthy way, I talk about a lot of those characteristics that I had. Winning is something that we tend to strive for, and we're not just satisfied with. So you don't win and go, that was great, I'm done. Like, I'm
Mhm.
done with my sport. You just keep going. You want to win again. You want to do it better. You want to go further in your career. And with gambling, if somebody is to do that in a controlled way, like many people can, if you happen to win, which is not as likely as losing, that's the time to step away. But
Yep.
I'm not, and a lot of athletes are not wired that way. We're like, okay, well, what's the next thing? So for me, if I'm winning like, a full house, awesome. I want that four of a kind. If I get
Yeah.
that, okay, the straight, let's get that straight flush, and then the royal flush you'd be searching for that. So there's always something bigger to achieve. And so you don't step away.
Hmm.
On the flip side of that, losing, it's not something that athletes, I think, embrace all that well. I know I didn't. So when you lose, you don't quit. You dig deeper, you try to do it better. These are all really, I think, advantageous as an athlete, not as a gambler. So there would
Yep.
be many times that I'm losing. That's when you get up and walk away. That's when a non-disordered gambler gets up and goes, okay, that's enough for the night. For me, it's like, I can't accept that. Back to the ATM, cash advances on credit cards, and so on and so on. So I could go on and on about the athlete characteristics, but those are just two of the big ones.
So for me, I think about like being a person budding in addiction at like 15, right? Like it was all around me, kind of like you described. But I remember the first time I used opiates, right? Like, and I remember that feeling and like that takeoff, right? And like, waking up the next day, I was like, I kind of want to experience that every day for the rest of my life, right? Did you have that in your beginning?
Yeah, definitely. And so I think I enjoyed all types of gambling. But there's something for me about cards. I used to sit next to my stepdad at the table, and he's playing with the black chips, which I thought was so cool, the $100 chips a hand. But again, even though he was, into it, he had his limits that were within his budget, and he stuck to them. And here I am over with my red chips, sometimes my green chips, and kind of mimicking and trying to like achieve this level. And it just felt like really incredible. And I will say I had a career-ending injury that was part of my story. And, I accessed a lot of adrenaline in my sport, and to go from this high achievement and adrenaline, regularly to nothing. I felt something very similar at the poker table. And I kind
Yep.
of would keep betting in a risky way, like increasing my bets, betting on hands that I didn't look at, so playing blind and just kind of increasing the risk to feel that same kind of adrenaline and excitement. And so for me, it is very specific. It is at the table. I would sometimes play blackjack. It didn't have that same kind of like juice for me. There was something about poker.
Yep.
So.
Tell me about your boxing career and what happened. You talked about an injury. Would you be willing to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Sure. So I was an amateur boxer. I was a Golden Gloves fighter, so multi-year Golden Gloves state champion. And when women's boxing was able to go to those national ranks, I was a national champion. And my future was really very much tied in with boxing. It was either going to be try to get into the Olympics when women's boxing came to the Olympics because we weren't in yet, or turn professional. And my coach was working with a promoter that wanted to turn me pro, and we had opportunities there. I had a long-term injury that I had been concealing because I knew it was pretty bad. I was a knockout puncher, so my straight left as a southpaw was my money punch, and I was overtraining that and had lost all the cartilage, torn tendons, was like really destroying the bones in my wrist, and that contributed to my one and only loss. When I finally did go get it looked at, it was kind of like, I don't know how you've been doing it this long. You're done. Like you're done. You need surgeries. It's you're done. And that devastated me not only because the adrenaline that I mentioned before, it was like this sense of identity.
Yep.
Athletes, when your sport is not just what you do, it's who you are. And it was very hard to go from, I mean, I had a promoter talking to my coach about putting me pro on the undercard of Camacho and Sugar Ray Leonard, like to go from that to like, you could do some light cardio. How's that sound? Felt like I'm a nobody, like I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to do anything important. And I felt like important and big, powerful somehow at the table.
So losing that and like kind of feeling like you lose your identity kind of played into the gambling taking off, huh?
It did. And actually loss is a theme, a recurring theme in my progression and in many other people's progression. So that was my first big loss of identity, loss of my career. And then I lost my stepdad, and he was the most important person or one of the most important people in my life. Lost him very young, 46 years old, unexpectedly. At the time, I had been offered a commission with the U.S. Air Force to be an officer. It was going to be a really cool opportunity, and I had to leave there in order to go home and be with him. And then I considered myself a failure, a washout, right? And I still see it that way. I'm a washout from the U.S. Air Force. So it's like just this beating down, those losses. And then we had moved to a state where instead of having to fly to Las Vegas or cross the border into Canada to gamble, I had a casino 45 minutes from my house.
Hmm.
There's one like 15 minutes from my house. So that, loss paired with that accessibility. And then like most of my family moved back east where we're from after we lost my stepdad. So then there's like no accountability either. So the progression just really took off from there.
At what point did you take a look at this in your life and be like, hey, this might be a problem for me?
So this is really interesting. Another athlete mentality, compartmentalization. We're
Hmm.
really good at it. I say we as if I'm still an athlete. I'm in my 50s, get over it. Uh, but athletes tend to really be able, like athletes have all the worries and concerns that everybody else has and all the pressures of their sport, right? And so when they got to compete, when they got to train, all those worries and stressors and strains whether it's physical injury, emotional stuff, relationship stuff, all just gets packed away, put on a shelf. Like, I got to deal with that later. I can't think about that right now, right? And we get really, really good at that. And I did that with my gambling. Like,
Mhm.
it seems crazy. I'm in the midst of it. I'm living it, and I don't even know it. Nobody knew it. I didn't know it. So it was very, very tightly packed away. I will tell you, the one time it would ever come out would be in sleep. There would be times where I would be at the casino very, very late, and there was smoking in the casinos at the time. So I'd be like saturated with smoke, get home so late, fall right into bed, not having like showered and getting that smoke out of me. And that smoke smell would just like wake me up, and I'd kind of toss and turn and go, did I really do that? Did I really empty that account? And that's when it would come to the surface, but I wake up and I go to work and I tighten it down, and it's like really, and I think so many gamblers are in the midst of it and don't see what's happening. And that was the case for me. And it took some really strange, changes for that to come out. And I will also acknowledge I was an addictions counselor at the time. So
Wow.
to make it even crazier, I was working with people healing from alcoholism and opioid addiction and cocaine addiction, and I'm shutting down the casino at night, right?
Hmm.
And I didn't see it. And I have a family history of alcoholism. I don't drink. I've never used a drug because I'm very, very defended against addiction. And then I'm literally living it in this other way and don't see it. So I really want to normalize to people, you could be living this and you don't even know what's happening to you. If anything, it's a lot of, I can't believe I'm so stupid. How could I do this again? But you're not really linking it to an actual disorder that makes sense because the way you're wired and circumstances. So my life changed. I had gotten engaged, and along with the marriage came a child. So I'm a step parent. And, that starts to become incompatible with spending, 6, 7 hours at a time in a casino.
Hmm.
And, I used to get comps, comps when you're spending a lot of time gambling, you're going to get all the free stuff and, meals and whatever. And sometimes hotels, whatever. And for a while, early on in my relationship with my now husband, we would go to the casino, restaurant, buffet, whatever. And I'm like, oh, I got it. It's on my comps. And it was like cool for a while, right? And then one day, he turns to me after we had gone so many times. And I said, I got it. And he goes, just how much do you gamble? And he said it super judgy too, right? And for some reason, it took that for me to just kind of look, and it freaked me out because I knew in that minute that everything that I had thought I had protected myself against for like my whole life got me anyway. And so in that moment, I was freaking out and I was like, it's okay, it's okay. Now that you know, just like do it normal, just be normal gambler. So I actually had a brief period of time where I tried to do the controlled gambling thing.
Yep.
And that's a real thing, and I don't want to diminish that. Some people can do that. I tried that, and I will say I can remember the exact last time that I tried that. I was at the casino with my husband. I sat down to play. I must have lost like 3, 4 hands in a row. So I'm down, I don't even know, like $100 in like 3 minutes. It's nothing. I'm just getting started. But he's like, oh my gosh, let's get out of here, which is the normal thing to do, right? And I was like, I'm just getting started. How can I leave now? But then in my head, I'm like, no, wait, you're trying to be the control figure, like a normal person would get up and get out of that chair. So I did, but it felt like so excruciating to get out of that chair that I realized for me, two hugely important things. One, somewhere along the line, I had passed that line,
Hmm.
being able to do it in a controlled way. But even more important for me is I realized I didn't want to do it in a controlled way. That's not what I like to do. I want to go in there and just stay there forever and double my bets when I feel lucky and just, that's how I had become accustomed to that kind of like intense, kind of sick way of playing. And so for me, that realization somehow was enough to totally shut it. And that's when I quit gambling. And we can talk more about the difference between not gambling and recovering. I didn't recover right away.
Okay. Do you feel like you had like a withdrawal period from gambling?
I don't think I did, though that's a real thing. That's a
Yes.
real people can experience. If I did, I didn't recognize it because again, even though I was an addictions counselor, I didn't know anything about disorder gambling. You know, I had a master's degree in clinical psychology. I'm working in the field. I actually worked at an agency that had a gambling program, though it was so teeny tiny, I don't even know if I knew about it. I oversee it now, right?
Hmm.
um, that I didn't even know that was a thing. So if there was like an agitation or even like a mood plummeting, I didn't recognize it for what it was.
Okay. Um, what was life like for you in that early recovery period?
Yeah. So I would even say it wasn't early recovery. It was just early not gambling
Okay.
because of so many factors with shame and just not I don't know. I didn't enter recovery. I just stopped gambling. I just shut it down. So it was like, don't talk about it. Don't do it. Don't ever do it again. You know, it just didn't happen. You know, again, that compartmentalization. And so it was actually fine. I didn't miss it. I didn't crave it. However, it didn't go away. All the hurt and shame and regret just hung out there. And I do believe, at least for me and for many people I've known, that if you don't kind of unsurface that and speak to that, it's going to get you. And over the years, so I did end up specializing in gambling disorder counseling, and I'm working with people in active gambling addiction, and I'm helping people to enroll in self-exclusion where they ban themselves from casinos. And I remember one time where I was sitting there helping somebody enroll in self-exclusion, and I looked up and I recognized them from the poker table. And there's an interesting thing in the gambling world that you can like know people, but you don't know them. You
Hmm.
know what game they play, you know how they play, you know like what position they like to sit in at the table. But you might not even know their name. If you do, you know their first name. You don't know where they live, So I recognized him and I started sweating, like full on sweating, terrified he was going to recognize me and that I was going to be like known as this fraud. Like, oh, you think you're a gambling counselor? You're a gambler. You played next to me. And that was part of the beginning of me recognizing like not gambling is not the same as recovering. And there were other things that came up that made that very, very clear that helped me to then start actually actively seeking recovery.
What was that recovery process like for you? Kind of getting out of the abstinence and into like a program of recovery. What did that look like for you?
So for me, it was starting to go to meetings. And so I will tell you, if you don't mind, I'll give you another story.
Please.
I was actually asked to speak at a conference in Las Vegas, which I had actually done, I think maybe one or two times before. This time, they actually wanted me, I believe, to talk about my experiences as a person with lived experience. And I went to check in. Of course, it's at a casino, right? Like everything's like at a casino. So I go to check in to my room and they take my ID and they type something into their computer and the clerk looks at me and she goes, hang on, I gotta talk to a supervisor. And she like took off. And I was sitting there going, and I was like all dressed up in my professional suit, and I felt all like I'm here not as a gambler, but I'm as a professional, and they want to hear what I have to say. And all of a sudden, I felt this big. I felt stuck to the ground. I felt seen in a not good way. I felt found out, and I was like, they know me. They know what I did. And I'm like, looking back, I'm like, what did I think? I like turned over tables and threw chips in the air. Like I wasn't like that person. So I don't know what I thought they knew, but the shame and the regret flooded me in that moment in a way that was it was awful. And I told this to a colleague of mine who's also in recovery, and she goes, yeah, that's why we go to meetings. And she the first Gamblers Anonymous meeting that I went to for myself. I had actually gone to a number of them with clients, for clients, and so I went to the first one for myself, and that was and actually, part of me had thought, I don't need them. I shouldn't go. I haven't gambled in this long. And meetings for sure can help people to not gamble or not drink or drug. And it's not just about that. It's being seen by people who see you and get you in a way that is non-judgmental. They've walked in your shoes in some way or another. So being able to go in there and just say, this is what I did. And ever people go, yep, is like so healing. And also finding a women's group was really helpful because, sometimes there's just certain things that you might experience as a female gambler or a female in recovery that you might just relate better with other females. And so it became that healing process of understanding and forgiving myself and saying, it totally makes sense that you ended up where you did. It totally makes sense that you did all these things. Let's start unpacking some of them. You had this early exposure, you had this family history that you didn't know. Like, one thing that people don't know is, yeah, just we know alcoholism can be genetically, passed down and stuff like that. What we don't know is it can go alcohol, it can go to alcohol to gambling. And actually, for gambling, that's the most common hereditary link is a parent or sibling with alcoholism. I didn't know that, and I had it. So being able to start to understand why it totally made sense, why those things that I did that didn't make sense actually did make sense.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a really like really healing and I think restorative process.
Absolutely. I do think recovery in general is a healing and restorative process. And like going through like what we go through, right? Like for me, like I tried to white knuckle it one time I came out of prison and I was like, I'm not gonna drink or drug, and I made it like 17 days, and then I got in a fight with my mom, and I went upstairs and drank mouthwash because I was so desperate for a drink,
Right.
and like one of the other things that you were really harping on was connection, right? Like you feel really connected to the women, and like for me, and like that was really big in the process of early recovery. Is I need connection to other sober men.
Right.
I needed those people in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that connection. So I feel like connection is the opposite of addiction.
Yes.
And being able, I say like we carry around this mask of, and for me, I did it because again, being an addictions professional who was active in an addiction while like that's, so boy, do we carry around this mask of I'm fine, everything's fine, right? And to set it down. And you don't even realize how much it weighs until you set it down. And I mentioned that I part of what I do is I work with student athletes, mostly at the collegiate level, and talk to them about their unique risk. And I do that through a company that does that with pro and amateur sport, all of that.
Wow.
Um, Once in a while, we have a support meeting just for us. And what's really, really neat is it's almost like nowhere in the world do I feel completely myself than in a room with them because they all totally get it. They're all former gamblers. They're all former athletes. It's and most of them have had gambling related incarcerations as well. There's no judgment there. Like
Hmm.
there's nothing I'm going to say that, oh gosh, I did this in the midst of my gambling and that they're going to you what? No, that's not going to happen. So, like, to be able to just be yourself, set it down for an hour, just set down the mask for an hour. Boy, does that, feel pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's awesome. How was your so continuing on through your recovery process and your journey, right? Like, did you see the relationship with your family grow and get better and all that? And like, what was that like for you?
It was interesting that one of the biggest and most obvious consequences of a gambling disorder is the financial end.
Hmm.
So, I came into this marriage with quite a lot of debt and I was ashamed of it, embarrassed. I had a decent job, the long-standing job. So it's like I shouldn't have been in that position. And so I had said I don't want to like combine our finances until I address my debt. And I did that. And it took years and years and years to do that, to do it the right way, pay it off slowly, not like looking for some big win to like, that's not the way to do it. And so part of it was, having this like accountability, like, because like when you're gambling and at least back then when you're doing it in person, it takes like hours. So you're hiding where you are, making up excuses for where you were. So like, just being able to be genuine about, where what I'm doing and where I am, like I think it was more internal because to be honest, like nobody really knew. So like
Mhm.
not like certain things were damaged relationship wise, because that, quitting gambling and the recovery process, like, began at kind of at the beginning of that important change. It was more internal, so like healing my finances, being more genuine and accountable. Yeah, and that's interesting. And somebody had said something on another podcast I listened to. So I think podcasts is a great way to connect with people, right? You'll never meet them. You can connect with them like over, it's pretty cool. So thank you for doing this. But
Thank
I
you.
heard you mention that they noticed in long-term recovery from gambling that they do things, little things, that they're increasing their risk. They said even just like pushing it further and further and further for how long I wait to fill my gas tank until I'm like coasting into that gas station on fumes. Like they recognize I'm kind of just pushing the limits to get that little bit of like a feeling of risk because we kind of really like that feeling. And I thought that was so fascinating because I had to recognize like that that's still kind of in me and I got to be careful about it.
Yep.
Like one of my jobs, I travel a lot and I was hiking and I like to hike off trail because I don't want to just plain old boring trail. I want to be like up in the, whatever on the looking over the edge of the mountain. And I encountered
A bear.
and like I was walking this way and it was walking that way and we like looked at each other and just stared at each other what felt like a minute, but it was probably like 15 seconds and then it like went away and I like got back to the trail, got my car, and I got to my car and I was like feeling a lot. And I found myself on my next trip, like, okay, where are these alligators at that I keep seeing the signs, at my next trip, and I was like, whoa, 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 watch out for that. That's like, we can have these lingering things that are from way back in the active days, that we need to watch out for. So that's part of that internal process is starting to recognize some of those things, not freak out about them, not beat myself up over them, just go like, hey, it's kind of that old behavior creeping back in. Watch out for that, So I know that's kind of a long drawn out answer, but.
No, that was really, really good. And that was a really funny story too. It's like now I'm looking for the next, the next
Yeah.
wild animal. What do you think the best lesson you learned in recovery is?
One I would say is that we feel completely unique in our experiences and in our pain.
Hmm.
And it is so lonely. And I will say this, that it should be said, of all the addictive disorders, gambling disorder has the highest suicide attachment.
Wow.
People do die from this. They die from that unique loneliness and pain. And so what I would say is no matter what you've done or how you think you are the only person who's ever done that, and there's something so wrong with you, I promise you, that's not it. There's millions of people who have, like you, experienced these things, done these things. Yeah, addiction often makes us act in ways that are not who we are. And so to really start to recognize you're not alone in this, it can get better. There's a difference between what you've done and who you are. I guess that's what I would say. Big difference between what you've done and who you are. And who you are can continue to evolve and grow, and it can really be beautiful.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a really good antidote. I love that. Thank you. You want to give me some gambling education? So some cool facts and stuff like that about gambling, or some things that I should know about gambling, maybe risk to young people, stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of, we see it all around us, so it's so very present. It's on our phones, it's when we're at sporting events, it's at the gas station, and sometimes we just think because it's there and they say it's legal or whatever, like, okay, it's cool. It's not for everybody at all times, and there are certain people who are at greater risk. Myself, I had a lot of risk factors. I had the early exposure, so like, yeah, we should wait. If we can wait, we should wait longer. Let our brains kind of like finish doing all that cool work that they're doing in adolescence and everything before getting exposed to that. The family history, a trauma history. There's certain people, certain ethnicities and races that are even more vulnerable, including Latinx community members, African American, Asian American, military and veterans. And if you think about that, they have a lot of characteristics that athletes have, right?
Hmm.
They're like maybe intense and brave and risk taking and all of that. And of course, athletes 4 to 6 times more likely to develop problematic gambling. So that's one thing I would say. And I would also say the numbers are way bigger than you would think. We used to think it was like 0.1%. And in Illinois, where I am, they did a statewide study and found that 3.8% of adults in Illinois had the fully diagnosable gambling disorder, and
Wow.
another like 7.6% had at-risk behavior. So over 1 million Illinoisans experiencing some sort of gambling related harm. That's just Illinois. So the numbers are huge. Those are some things. Other things I would say is that people with other addictive disorders and even mental health concerns are also at greater risk. So it's something where I've known a lot of people in the work that I do who are recovering from a substance addiction, and they're celebrating milestones by going to the casino together. And it seems so innocuous because we're not putting anything in our body, but this is when you talk about facts, the way that the brain receives gambling, input is very much like a stimulant. And there's parts of the reward centers of the brain are activated very much like somebody took a stimulant. And so we need to recognize that risk there and be very, very intentional about, making decisions about bringing gambling into our lives. Yeah, I could go on and on and on, but I would say that we really do need to look at young adults right now. College students are being found to have much higher rates of disorder gambling. I do want to say that we need to recognize that a lot of people who are getting caught up in gambling right now are early gamblers, and they might be able to correct course. So these are people that might need to just take a break. They might need to step back from it. They might need to do it differently. It's not necessarily like you got to enter recovery. Like me, it might be like, hey, let's head this off. And I say to people, it's never too late. It is never too late to reach out for help, but it's never too early.
Hmm.
Like, I didn't even know this could happen to me. So, like, wouldn't it have been better if I had even known it could go wrong? What does it look like to go wrong? What do you do if you see it go wrong? Because maybe it would have still been an option for me in my life, but it's not now.
Yeah, that's really a very positive way to look at it, right? Like early intervention truly is key here. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And we have like this disconnect right now where people are like, this is not working out for me. And then people are coming at them with like abstinence language and like long-term, like, oh, you should self-exclude, like for a lifetime ban. Like we got to have other options for people who are kind of just early on going like, it's not quite what I thought. And so that's something that we really are, as a field striving to do.
So if somebody is struggling or noticing behaviors, they can exclude for a smaller period of time?
Yeah, it depends on where you are. So state to state, it's different, unfortunately. And
Hmm.
then depending on the product. So like there's a lot of sports betting apps that actually have like a cool off period or a ban that they can do within the app. So it's more a matter of finding out what's available and seeing like of all these options, would any of these work for me? And 1-800-GAMBLER is a nationwide number, no matter where you are in the United States. You call 1-800-GAMBLER, you're going to get to whatever is like the helpline where you are. So that's just really handy to know.
Yeah, that's wonderful. All right, last question for you. If somebody came in here and they were in their first 24 hours of recovery, what do you think the best piece of advice or support that you could give them is?
I would say you're not alone. And just keep trying. Find out what works for you. There's multiple pathways to recovery, and what works for one person doesn't work for everybody. Um, so I think that's what I would say.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for coming on. You have an awesome story. And I'm really, really glad I got to meet you at a conference and we got to connect and stuff like that. So it was really cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of
Yeah.
of course.